This was the most brutal interview in history. The moment candidates received their test papers, they froze. The sheets were completely blank, not a single word on them. Everyone exchanged confused glances, but no one dared make a move. Just minutes earlier, the examiner had laid down 3 ironclad rules. The test paper must not be marked or damaged, no communication with the examiner or guards was allowed, and no one could leave the room. Break any of these rules and you're out. The examiner added that this interview consisted of only one question, requiring just one answer. Then he posed what he called the question.
Any questions?
The room fell silent. Since talking to him was forbidden, who would dare respond? With that, he started the timer and walked out. As time ticked by, the tension mounted. Some tapped nervously on their desks, others bounced their legs anxiously. Finally, Mary couldn't take it anymore and decided to just start writing. But the second her pen touched the paper, a guard escorted her out. Mary was eliminated for violating the first rule. She had marked her test paper. Seeing this, everyone immediately set their pens aside. That's when Mike had a breakthrough. Since there were only 3 rules, anything not explicitly forbidden was technically allowed. They could walk around, chat, trash the room, even hurt each other if they wanted to. Mike suggested they work together to figure out what the real question was. Anna offered the first theory. Maybe the paper was printed with invisible ink that only appeared under certain conditions. So they started experimenting. First, regular light. Nothing. They smashed the normal lights, and blue emergency lights flickered on. Still nothing. They broke those too, and an eerie red glow filled the room, but the paper remained blank. Then Mike came up with another idea. Maybe they needed to shade the paper with pencil to reveal hidden text. He scribbled furiously over Mary's discarded test sheet, but nothing appeared. What about water? He tore his paper into 4 pieces, handed one to John to wet with saliva, and took another to the corner to, well, conduct his own experiment. But aside from a yellow stain, nothing showed up. Just when everyone was stumped, the quiet one, Paul, finally spoke up. He rambled something barely comprehensible about looking with your heart and paying close attention. Mike mocked him mercilessly. Meanwhile, Lisa began sharing what she knew about the company's background. About 10 years ago, a mysterious disease had infected countless people, and many had died. Then the company's CEO invented a groundbreaking drug that cut the mortality rate in half. That patent catapulted the company into a global healthcare giant. Anna's eyes lit up. Her boyfriend had contracted the same disease, and employees got the medication at half price. She had to land this job. Suddenly, something clicked in her mind. She slowly approached the guard. Talking was off limits, but nobody said anything about physical contact. She reached toward him and pulled a lighter from his uniform. Anna looked up at the ceiling sprinklers, her mind racing. She noticed the test paper had a glossy texture, almost like photo paper, and the red light reminded her of a dark room. What if the sprinklers released developing fluid instead of water? She tried to light a flame to trigger the fire sensor, but she was too short to reach. Mike helpfully handed her Mary's discarded test paper to use as a torch. With it, Anna managed to set off the sprinkler, but only plain water came out. Then the guard walked straight toward her. It turned out Mike had deliberately switched the papers. He hadn't given her Mary's sheet, he'd given her her own. Just like that, Anna was eliminated. John, always the straight shooter, was about to confront Mike when the lights suddenly went out. Turns out the lights were voice activated, and John had accidentally said something that sounded like lights off. He shouted lights on, and sure enough, they came back. Still scheming, Mike turned his attention to the silent Paul, manipulating him into destroying his own test paper. Paul was eliminated too. As Paul shuffled out of the room, hunched over in defeat, John had seen enough. He knocked Mike out cold with one punch and tied him to a chair. When Mike came to, he frantically demanded his medication, claiming he had a life-threatening condition and would die without it. As everyone scrambled to help, they realized Mike's pills were missing. They searched everywhere but came up empty. Without his medication, Mike passed out again. That's when Kyle dropped a bombshell. He accused Lisa of being a plant, someone who must know the secret to the test. After all, she seemed to know way too much about the company. They cornered her and demanded answers. Kyle pried Lisa's eyes open and held the test paper like a weapon, pointing it at her face. Terrified, Lisa confessed. Yes, she worked for the company, but she was only here to get a promotion. She knew nothing about the test. Meanwhile, Mike started convulsing. Without his medication, he was in serious danger. Lisa's eyes landed on Kyle, and a thought struck her. She found a piece of gum stuck under Kyle's desk, and hidden inside was Mike's pill. Kyle had been trying to take out the competition by any means necessary. Lisa tried to give Mike the pill, but Kyle knocked it out of her hand and it fell down a drain. Desperate, Lisa looked up at the surveillance camera and called for help. But the next second, a guard dragged her out. She had communicated with the examiner. Lisa was eliminated. Quick-thinking Daisy used a hairpin to fish the pill out of the drain and fed it to Mike, who was barely hanging on. Now only 4 people remained, with 10 minutes left on the clock. Once Mike recovered, he jumped right back into strategizing. The examiner had said there would be only one winner. They'd have to eliminate the others by any means necessary, even if it meant taking someone out. Hearing this, both Mike and John eyed the guard's holstered gun. After a struggle, Mike grabbed it and pointed it at the other 3, ordering them to leave voluntarily. Kyle, terrified, walked out first, eliminated. Daisy followed, but as she passed John, she gave him a look and shouted for the lights to turn off. In the darkness, John lunged at Mike to grab the gun, but was hit by a wild shot and collapsed. Then Mike spotted a foot in the corner. Daisy hadn't actually left. She'd just been hiding. Enraged, Mike raised the gun to finish her off. But just then, the timer's alarm blared. Time was up. Strangely, the guard didn't react. Furious, Mike screamed at the screen, and that's when the guard approached him. "You're eliminated." Mike was baffled. The guard showed him his watch. There were still 30 seconds left. It turned out that earlier, while everyone was arguing about the test, Paul had secretly set the timer forward by 2 minutes. By yelling at the examiner on the screen, Mike had violated the rules. He was out. Now only Daisy remained. She picked up a pair of glasses from the floor. Paul had dropped them when he was escorted out. Using the lenses and some broken glass, she fashioned a makeshift magnifying glass. And there it was, tiny text that read, "Question 1. Daisy remembered what the examiner had said. After announcing the rules, he had asked just one question.
Any questions?
That was the entire test. And the answer was dead simple. All she had to say was no problem. Just then, Paul walked back in, followed by the examiner. Everything suddenly made sense to Daisy. She walked up to Paul and said, "5 said, no problem." She passed the interview. As it turned out, Paul was the company's real CEO, the scientist who had invented the life-saving drug. Because demand for the medication far exceeded supply, the company needed someone thoughtful, level-headed, compassionate, and willing to listen to manage its distribution. John, by the way, was fine. The gun had been loaded with blanks. And Daisy? She joined the company as a top executive with a multi-million-dollar salary.